From Chapter 2 of Digimon Seekers onwards, I was impressed by the translation since it seemed to be an actual human doing it, and not just a machine translation. Or perhaps just a really poor human translation like in Chapter 1. The only errors that pop up now, here and there, are seemingly human ones, like small typos or mixing up characters, which was done at least twice, so not perfect, but not as bad as what we saw previously in Chapter 1. Due to the increase in quality of the English translation, Chapter 2 looked fairly promising, as did the future of Bandai's English releases, as not only did Seekers see an increase in quality, but Digimon Dreamers started on Digimon.net and is also being translated into English by an official localization team. Other than this increase in translation quality, Chapter 2 saw us learn more about Eiji and his home life, along with the introduction of his childhood friend and hacker, Leon Alexander, or also known as the hacker name Judge, and how Leon is tied into the story. While Chapter 1 focused on world building, introducing the Digipolice and, of course, Eiji's introduction to the SOC, his meeting with Professor Usenji, Chapter 2 continued on, introducing us more to the SOC and the crackers in that group, as well as meeting Leon and learning about hackers and their way of life. With the world building of Chapter 1 out of the way, Chapter 2 starts to give us some action scenes with some Digimon battles, and one would expect that Chapter 3 will give us even more actions as things heat up between Hacker Leon and Eiji and his cracker lifestyle. Chapter 2 also has us learn about a dictatorship called the Nation of X, which is to blame for a lot of cyber terrorism and crime. This is honestly fairly hilarious timing since, during the release of Chapter 2, Twitter was renamed to X, and a lot of people seem to voice complaints and issues with Elon Musk and his handling of Twitter now he is in ownership of it, mainly the renaming of Twitter to X and tweets to posts, and effectively removing any birds or tweeting from the app, which is kind of wild. You could have just sat there and let Twitter basically run itself, but no, you have to rename it. But again, it is fairly hilarious timing that we have a dystopian future being depicted in Digimon Seekers with a nation called X, and now we have Twitter being renamed X, life imitates art, and so on. So I did find that kind of funny timing, just for that to happen just as Chapter 2 was introducing the X Nation. I just found it somewhat amusing. And then we have, in terms of these action moments, while I was initially skeptical, I quickly became much more optimistic for the fight scenes in this web novel. In fact, the moment where the Tyrannomon show up to help Lugomon in his fight against Boutmon was actually pretty cool, and I was actually kind of excited. We have the contrast between Eiji's desire to beat Leon and to be right, compared this to Leon's desire to protect Eiji, and then this made Leon's downfall at the end of Chapter 2 to be a fairly emotional one. And of course, if you've listened to the podcast or watched any of my videos before, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of Dark Digivolutions, so having one so soon in this story was something I'm definitely a fan of. I always do love a Dark Evolution, especially when it's one that has some huge punishment that impacts the main character or the partner of the Digimon who has just Dark evolved. I love when it's really held as this awful thing when you force your Digimon to evolve, and because Digimon can't evolve wrong, they just have a darker path that they can take. We saw this, of course, in the original first series of Digimon Adventure, and then we had it in Digimon Survive, and now we have it in Digimon Seekers, and I know we've had it in quite a few seasons or more or less most of the seasons of Digimon, we've had a dark evolution, and it's something I'm always a fan of, and I like when it's especially got a really, really bad thing that comes of it, a really awful thing, sometimes death, sometimes a huge lesson is learned, and I'm a huge fan of that. And in this case, we have Eiji so determined to be correct and to beat Leon, but on the other hand, Leon, as soon as Eiji is in trouble because of his own actions, Leon, despite, again, these circumstances being just because Eiji has caused them to happen, Leon sacrifices himself for Eiji, even though it's completely Eiji's own fault. So that's an interesting contrast. We have Eiji is so determined to be correct and to beat Leon that he has his Digimon evolve into a dark evolution and effectively causes Leon's downfall, and Leon actually wants to save Eiji even when Eiji has tried to effectively kill Leon. So there's that nice contrast between the two, and of course we get a dark evolution, which I'm always a pretty big fan of. In terms of predictions I have for the future of Digimon Seekers, I don't trust Professor Richard Sanji, at all, and I'm wondering if somehow tied to the X Nation. I'm also wondering if the Royal Knights will actually be good this time, since they tend to be antagonists in the majority of their appearances in the Digimon franchise. I'm also wondering how Leon will make it out of the vortex, as various leaks from the future BE memories show that there's possibly more coming for Pulsemon. Overall, it was a really nice thing to have a bump in quality of the story, in addition to the huge bump in quality of the translation. And the last part of Chapter 2 truly had me wanting more. We do, of course, have the intermission between Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, with the intermission coming this upcoming Sunday. I'm not sure what the intermission will be. It's got a specific time, so it's not a break. It's got something presumably coming during that in-between week. So whether or not this is like the events before Digimon Seekers, maybe it's Leon and Eiji's childhood or Leon's childhood, maybe it's a flashback, maybe it's Leon's point of view from the whole fight. It could be anything. It could be, setting the scene for Chapter 3. It could be more Digipolice interactions. It could be something that happened before the events of Digimon Seekers. It could be something, it could be the Digipolice watching on the fight between Eiji and Leon. It could be anything. I'm not going to say it's going to be something fantastic. It could just be a short side story with not much interaction to the actual plot. It could just be background information. It could even be just an interview between the writers or the translators or anything. It could be anything there. So who's to say? This is the whole of Digimon Seekers is effectively something new to the franchise. So it's really kind of hard to see where it's going. But I'm happy to be along for the ride for it. I'm really enjoying it. And then, of course, once the intermission is done, we have Chapter 3. I'm wondering if this will focus more on the Digipolice and the SOC, since the next Digimon Seekers BE memory is the SOC and Digipolice BE memories with the rosters from each of those factions, while we had the first BE memory being just Eiji and Lugamon, and we have these ones which are faction-specific. There's also the fact that one would presume there to be a Pulsemon one, judging by leaks that have been data mined, that resulted in a further evolution for Pulsemon. So, or rather, a Jogress for Pulsemon. So there is that one, which I would assume we learn about maybe during Chapter 3. It seems to be one BE memory, or at least one BE memory release or 2-pack per chapter. So I'm wondering if we learn about this Pulsemon BE memory during Chapter 3, maybe even during the intermission, depending on what it is. So there is a lot to go on there, but I would assume that Chapter 3 would focus on the SOC and Digipolice, whereas we had Chapter 1 focusing on Eiji and world building, Chapter 2 focusing on Leon and further world building, and Chapter 3 would probably focus on the Digipolice, who didn't really appear too much in Chapter 2 itself. So those are my thoughts for Chapter 2. Really hopeful for the future of the Digimon Seekers story. I'm really enjoying it. I know it's not for everyone, but it's definitely something for me. I mentioned this in my Chapter 1 review about how it feels like a cross between the worlds in Digimon World 2003 and the world we saw in Cyber Sleuth in the best possible way. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how the rest of this story goes. Again, if you're not a fan of reading and you're kind of wondering what I'm talking about and you want an audiobook, I have actually released the first 2 chapters in audiobook form, so give those a listen if you haven't already. Chapter 1 is about 3 hours in length, Chapter 4 is 4 hours in... Chapter 1 is 3 hours in length, Chapter 2 is 4 hours in length, so give those a listen if you haven't already, especially if you want to know more about the story and maybe reading isn't your thing. Of course, you can just read it for free in English on Digimon.net. That is an option. And of course, I recommend, even if you do listen to my readings of it, to definitely check out the official release on Digimon.net on the basis that I want Bandai to know that there's interest in this. If there's no clicks, there's no interest. So they would be paying attention to the amount of views, to what the interest is. Especially because a lot of people have been wondering if they think that Digimon Seekers will get a book form once it's completed. I would say that would make sense to release it at least in Japanese, because light novels are fairly popular there, and there is a market. We know that there have been Digimon light novels before, with both the Digimon Adventure novels novelization and the novelization of Last Evolution. There's not so much of a sure demand for it in English. So if you want any future releases, the best way is to just appreciate and click on the official release, because it's for free. You can just click on it. It won't take you any time just to click a few links. I always do recommend that, especially if you're just consuming it using any audiobook version or just watching videos on the topic. So in any case, those are my thoughts on Chapter 2. Let me know your thoughts and more in the comment section below. Like this video for Leon being described as muscular basically every opportunity he could be. Every time Leon was described, it was just like muscular tank of a square man. It was just consistently just describing him as this huge muscular man. So like this video for that, I guess. Subscribe if you haven't already, and yes, I did see this morning that we hit 15,000 subscribers, so thank you so much for that. So definitely subscribe if you haven't already, and if you have subscribed, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your neighbours, and of course, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!